Some of the most impressive Power Rangers products you used to be able to buy were off the shelf in the store. Now they come to your door in tiny pieces that contribute to a giant model. If you've been waiting for something more age appropriate from Power Rangers merch, this is it. Hey guys, Ryan here. I was lucky enough to be sent the Megazord by Fanhome for a collab on Instagram. There was no requirement to do anything over here on YouTube, but come on, I've done like 50 Megazord reviews, so for me, this was definitely not a matter of if, but when. Approaching this then, I'm going to be my usual constructive self while aware of potential bias of basically being gifted this. Fortunately, I've got a review format that suits just this kind of thing. So without further ado, let's talk about the DeAgostini Magazine Megazord, starting as ever with the toy history. Well, where do you want to start? Dino Megazord is unquestionably the most iterated toy in Power Rangers and even Z-Ranger history. Check out my Why Do They Keep Making Dino Megazord video for a now incomplete history of the various versions of the toy over the decades, and spoiler, look out for a part 2 to that. In 2017, I reviewed a version of Dino Megazord from the Tamashii Nations and Bandai collaboration line called The Soul of Chogokin. Despite trying to find reasons for you not to buy the thing, the most obvious one being the high price point, it still came to be my favourite version of Megazord of all time, the absolute accept no compromises edition. This is honestly the first toy in a long time where I've just felt awe of being in the presence of it. That feels premium and contains all the bells and whistles that previous iterations had skipped over, while introducing new features and posability we could only have dreamt of previously. So imagine my surprise when in 2021 we got news that DeAgostini's Altair imprint in France were releasing a 60cm version of Dino Megazord in a partwork magazine, and it looked remarkably like Soul of Chogokin. Looking at those images, I do think this is based on Soul of Chogokin. I can't think of another Megazord where we've seen this much detail on Megazord. Gradually you would build the Megazord piece by piece, issue by issue, out of die-cast and ABS plastic parts. Side note, but have you ever seen the example of how much bigger IMAX film is than 35mm? Obviously the screen is bigger, but the print itself is several times the size too. It's the same film, but a bigger resolution print of it. I love the idea of this, but obviously the magazine was in French, and if you were outside France, you had to import it through a third party, which would also bulk up the price. Now though, we have all the contents in our native English through DeAgostini's Fanhome imprint version. The collection started in late 2024 and offered a 1 or 2 year subscription option in order to pay and receive frequent shipments of the partwork. Then in 2025, they started offering a single payment full kit option, which was the lowest overall cost, though meant you had to put up the highest amount up front because you'd pay for the whole thing in one. Before you can bring them together, you need to put them together. The biggest part of this experience is actually assembling the thing. This is a first for me, though if you've ever bought the Super Mini-Pla releases of Bandai Japan at the complete opposite end of the size spectrum, as those are much smaller than the original deluxe releases, then you may have some idea of what to expect here. Except this uses a lot of screws to connect the pieces, but don't worry, it hides away pretty much all of them. During construction though, you basically live with a screwdriver in your hand and constantly refer to the instructions on what's next. It's a weird one to assign a toy history to because it's always delivered in pieces. The only way you get to see the finished product is after it's all been assembled together. So even though it released in 2024, the earliest you could complete it was 2025, and those that actually started in 2024 are probably still working through their subscription periods. Once you do start to see what they're going for though, what's the design? So this is an incredible way of doing Dino Megazord. I think whatever your thoughts are on this thing, you have to give it to them for crafting something so unique and so impressive. Having the sheer gall to be like, yeah, we think a 2 foot tall combining Megazord is absolutely doable, and the buyers, well, they're going to build it from the ground up, and when they do, it'll be the most realistic and impressive looking Power Rangers display piece in their collections. Absolutely crazy. It's not completely unique in design, but we'll get to that. But the detail is so impressive, you'll know I disliked inaccurate stickers like we got back when Power Rangers toys first started by Bandai America. Then I love the details in Soul of Chogokin's design, and that is back here in a bigger scale than ever. Everything that made up these Zords' unique looks on screen has been crafted. Everything that's required from them to form Megazord has been carefully hidden. You end up with this best of all worlds scenario where the dinosaurs look so accurate to the TV show, and then the Megazord looks great too. Not as narrow as how the robot appeared once it started moving and obviously became a guy in a suit, but certainly the fairest compromise possible from Zords that look as accurate as they do. Remember, SoC was the first to change the design in some critical ways. Mastodon had never had covers, Pterodactyl had never had wings that actually looked like the show, Triceratops had never had chain-link horns or the pop-out tank treads, and sections of saber-toothed tiger had never had joint posability in the legs. Tyrannosaurus had never had posable claws and a twisting waist. With every version of design of Dino Megazord, there's usually a choice there that I don't like. But here, I just love it. I look at this thing, and more than any other incarnation of Megazord, I think, yeah, that's the one. I think if I was being picky, I might have made the pterodactyl chest piece teeth emblem less mirrored and more silver, but I don't mind it, and hey, it's not like you couldn't deconstruct it and repaint it if you really wanted to. I always said about the SoC design, you owe it to your childhood self, and basically a decade later, I still think this design is the ultimate. No one has ever bettered it, and really, why bother? Just do another mech, right? This is the superb Soul of Chogokin design that's been reinterpreted as a model kit though. So, what are the differences from the original? And there's so many versions of this now, so I guess I'll just pull out a few highlights. From the original Dino Megazord, from the Bandai Legacy, from the original version of this design, Soul of Chogokin, and from another modern iteration, Hasbro's 2022 Zap version. I don't have the Playmates Builder Megazord, which is the tallest combining toy version so far, but still wouldn't get much higher than the waist of this thing. I mean, besides the 93 OG, which is probably one of the best reference points for most of you out there, you'll see how much it towers over it. It's colossal. It makes your original Megazord seem less mega in a way. Even Hasbro's Zap, which was until Playmates version the tallest of all time, can't hold a candle to what becomes a gigantic robot toddler. Parts for the T-Rex Zord are spread over 39 issues, so 1/3 of the collection is all Tyrannosaurus, and if you think of it as the central component of the Megazord, the largest single Dinozord, it makes sense. They haven't just upped the scale on the Soul of Chogokin though, there's more going on here where pieces have been split into more parts, which adds to the weight and the quality. Sometimes it introduces screws where there weren't previously anything there, like the underside of the saber-tooth tiger's front paws, but that's just one example of how things have been altered from the SoC to accommodate its bigger scale and more intricate build. The joints are interesting because they don't ratchet. They're built on 4 screw connectors. Sorry, I don't know the official name for these. It is enough reinforcement to hold the parts in place, but I do recommend screwing them in tight because either the rotation of the joints or the weight on top of it, I think, carries the risk of undoing the screws gradually out of place over time. Although it is the Soul of Chogokin's overall design, the scale of this new model allows for the introduction of some electronics and USB ports that just weren't possible on the original. So each Zord carries a rechargeable battery and has LED light up and flashing eyes. The Megazord head then has the 6th set on the model. Only Pterodactyl is controlled by the concealed power button alone, the rest can all be controlled by a remote, which makes for some pretty striking display potential. Definitely the big addition here, and makes the Dinozords look ferocious and primal, which are not words I would have used to describe the previous kids' toys. So well done to the designers for making this work. The fact that they managed to fit those pieces in here without altering the model is so impressive, and the USB ports, which could be ugly, have been really tastefully placed to ensure less disruption. Also, they appear so tiny on what is such a gigantic structure, it just feels right. Remember, because this version is a build, there's an unknowable percentage of how good it eventually looks that correlates to your accuracy during the process. What I mean is, if you rush it, if you don't screw parts in tight enough, or equally screw them in so tight it stresses the plastic, if you chip, scratch or otherwise break bits, or if you use too much or too little glue, you'll probably then obsess over those imperfections. So you do need to find a leisurely pace to build at. You need to be in the mood, you'll obviously want to complete the build, why wouldn't you? It's an astounding final product, but have that in the back of your mind when you do. be careful, be precise. Trust me when I say this is Power Rangers for adults, and you need a steady hand and a lot of patience. Another big difference is the final issue's selection of reinforcement plastic pieces. These, I'm happy to say, are optional. The Megazord can stand without them, like mine currently is, but they are there if you want to try give it a bit more stability to the thing, especially the parts with a bit more posability and general wobbliness to them. So that's everything that's changed, but what's bad about it? This is a very subjective take, but the way that the build flits around all 5 Zords throughout the process means that you don't actually complete a Zord until issue 76, the Pterodactyl, the easiest overall Zord that only took me like an evening to put together. 10 issues later, you'd finish Saber-Tooth Tiger, another 10 issues later you'll finish Mastodon, 3 issues later, part 99, you'll finish Triceratops, then you're in the final stretch and you'll finish Tyrannosaurus with issue 118. Then you've got the sword and then the plastic reinforcement pieces. So practically the first 2/3 of the build, you've just got pieces. Then in the final act, they all start to come together. When I got my full kit, I was fortunately able to reorder the build by Zord, and I built them in morph order, leaving T-Rex till last, as I figured it would be the most complex, and needed to be able to, load bear everything together, so tackling it last was more reassuring. This is something you can only do with the full kit model, or if you choose to get the parts and store them until you have them all if you're on the subscription version. There's a few snags with this method in that some of the parts are actually bundled in at different stage numbers. Sometimes there's a space in one issue's parts list and they'll include a one-off part for another Zord instead. You need several Saber-Tooth Tiger parts from the T-Rex packs, so you have to find the right bits. And equally, a part of the Pterodactyl's shiny chest plate is in there with the Saber-Tooth, so you have to be quite disciplined in keeping on top of all that. But I would say I found it really satisfying and engaging to have a Zord in mind when I started building, rather than flitting between all 5. And I get why they did that, because over 1 year or 2, you get to do a bit of everything. So whichever Zord is your favourite, by issue 19, you'll have started every one. I realised that when building it, you have to be step perfect, instruction accurate from the start. If you make a mistake at any stage and don't realise immediately, it's a huge pain to put it right. So you have to stay focused the whole time. I have got better in time at doing something passive like listening to YouTube while doing it, but I am definitely wary of my attention and try stay vigilant to what the numbers are in relation to the parts list, especially when it's doing something unique. You can kind of relax a bit more when you're building the other side of the same Zord, because it's usually just the same process but mirrored. There are some limitations to the model though, and let's go in Zord order. So Mastodon's metal shoulder covers, these don't snap into place and they kind of mark the surrounding metal by chipping off the black paint. They're also very tight to finagle and are very heavy. The joints don't really seem to want to bend, though they do. I'm always frightened of breaking it. A silver lining here perhaps is that I've realised from finally watching show footage that I've been doing tank mode wrong for years. I thought the shoulder pads only ever lifted up for the Megazord mode, but no they don't, they lift up for tank mode. So although it is screen accurate to be hollow shoulder pads, it is fine to use the covers boxed out instead. You could fold up the covers completely and hide them underneath the shoulder pad. That is your preference and your risk, because I don't want to be folding these covers more than they need to be. There's actually nothing wrong with Pterodactyl other than the electronics are manual, which always trips me up when the others can be controlled by the remote. I think they've done this so you don't accidentally activate the light while it's in its Megazord mode, because you just run down the battery and to no benefit. And maybe because there's not enough room for the infrared sensor in there, but one of those things. The Triceratops has the opening carriage and pull down tank treads, which look awesome. However, you still can't lock them out, so it often flops back in, and his head is pretty loose, especially in Megazord mode. The model makers must have been aware of this, and that's why the parts to issue 120 include additional pieces designed to reinforce the rigidity of the combined form here. You can technically proceed without them, but you obviously might feel more confident and less frustration with them. It's a small shame that they don't paint the inside of the Triceratops cannon's recess. I know some versions did that with a sticker. Is it even accurate? It's not exactly frequently shown on the show, so couldn't find out for you. Something else I'm going to carry over from my criticism of the sort of Jigoken design that hasn't been changed here is that there's no motion in the Triceratops tank treads or Saber-tooth Tiger's wheels. I would have enjoyed that even if it wasn't designed to be used, because realistically, where are these giant models going to be driving around? And the weight of the tank mode wouldn't exactly love pulling everything along on them either. So I get it, it's just one of those things that irked me about the SoC DeAgostini version, carried it over because they weren't to know any different. Saber-tooth Tiger, there's not much to report other than in the combination you can easily snag the silver outer wheel bit on the yellow body of the Zord, but it's nothing that moving it out of the way doesn't solve. The T-Rex Zord's arms have restricted movement compared to the SoC in that they don't splay outwards, so you're a little bit more limited there. You need to be really careful with the shin guard piece as well. Mine broke. Chris Falcon Builds on YouTube had the Altair version a year ago, but his broke in the same way. The way you place force on it stresses the piece out. It's not as durable as the force you have to place on it, so when you do need to access the combiner peg, remember to gently prise it up, then get your whole finger behind the whole piece, the red and silver, rotate carefully in unison so you never put all the force on the silver bit alone, it's just too small to take it. And the Megazord Saber, so oversized in the sort of Jigoken version, seems slightly underscaled here. Seems ironic to say, given that this is definitely the biggest power sword I've ever owned and I can fit my entire fist around the handle. Overall, it's not a big deal, and I wonder if the weight of the object might have played into the decision of that. Could just be my opinion. Curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Throughout the build, some pieces didn't ask for glue, but really needed it. You find a piece, usually a screw hole cover, the Triceratops' claw, one of the Saber-tooth Tiger's teeth, missing or on the floor, and you basically have to sort it out. Be careful with this though, because I think you can sometimes see glue through some of the more painted plastic. If you're using a manual screwdriver, you have to be quite strong with steady hands. It sometimes requires more force than I expected. It's not all the time, but there are screws where you really need to press force onto them in order to get them down into the metal or plastic without the screw head becoming stripped. And sometimes you're not happy with how you've secured a part together, there'll be a wobble or some looseness, so by challenging yourself to kind of tighten the screw even though your palm is burning, and obviously you want to be careful not to crack anything, you can usually get the desired tension that looks and responds how you think it should. Each Zord has a heavy head, so trying to pose it and keep it in position can be a bit challenging. Generally the default position is perfect though. Weight seems to be a big review talking point with Megazords this decade, and the problem with it here is that it makes moving the whole Megazord quite scary and unsettling. I feel very confident picking up one Zord at a time, but once it's all assembled, it all gets a bit more dubious. Where do you hold it from? If you take the thighs, the legs have a tendency to collide together, or at worst, fall off if they're not connected on the ports properly. And if you do take just the legs, it feels very top heavy. You end up trying to cradle it like a toddler. It's very bizarre. My current method is grab it around the waist and then put an arm as reinforcement under the legs. You also have to be extra sensitive with elaborate poses. You might want to pose the Megazord a certain way, but you sort of need to check it's structurally sound, like a building, before doing it. Balance is everything. And I do wish the remote was printed to explain what each button does, rather than just having to memorize it. I know this is standard practice with remotes like these, but a sticker cover would have gone a long way, maybe one for the customizers out there. And while on the topic of wishlist stuff, it would have been really cool if they could have had a sound for Megazord sequence has been initiated when you pull the horns out or something. We'll add it on manually, I guess. On the flip side then, what's good about it? It's the Dinozords and Megazord mode done spectacularly. We've never had these designs in this size and at this quality. The biggest pro for this collection is that it's your chance to create probably the nicest version of Megazord you'll ever own, and to do it from scratch. I hope from the section on toy history that you realize this, as a product, is about as niche as it gets. A full-on eclipse had to occur, stars had to align for this even to be an option for us. But here we are, it exists, and the world of Power Rangers merchandise is all the better for it. I bet Japan are jealous, and on the rare occasion that happens, you know they've done something right for Power Rangers that just wasn't explored for Super Sentai. From a skill level, if you're familiar with Lego and have ever applied a light kit, I'd say you can do this. It's a different experience naturally because you're using a screwdriver for 90% of your time, But you crest the wave of that similar experience whereby you're building forever, and then suddenly in the final bag it all just comes together and you can't quite believe it was ever just bags of separate pieces. If you've ever heard of the IKEA effect, the idea that you have more attachment towards items that you put together yourself, so if you already feel childhood nostalgic attachment towards this thing, you can now create some new modern grown-up memories and bonds to it by putting your time, effort and energy into creating this version. I do feel this weird attachment to it, like, wow, we had some good times, didn't we? Many hours spent peering over instructions, working out which screw size was next. But every time a Zord was complete, I would then just spend the next 20 to 30 minutes gulping at it with this incredulous appreciation. Like, how can this even exist? Something else that I wasn't expecting to happen was that I started to appreciate the mechanisms that make this whole thing functional. All the layered behind the scenes assemblies and hundreds of hidden screws that reveal just what an engineering marvel this thing really is. There were times making this where I would go, oh, so that's how that works. Like the Triceratops's tank treads and the T-Rex's head construction, and how the Mastodon's arms rotate and turn. As mentioned, similarly to SOC, the Mastodon has the covers for both Zord mode, which Zap did as rigid unclippable pieces that doubled as stabilizer heels in Megazord mode. These bend into filled shoulder pads, so it looks filled in rather than a recess. It's very convincing. There's still the fantastic deployable rubber clips for Pterodactyl in the tank mode too, probably still the best way they've ever worked out how to do this. And the hands are posable, including a thumb and all the fingers. Remember, Zap made you take the hands off and swap them over to other ones like it was some kind of action figure, which they did get some cool hand poses out of that you can't get here. However, I would counter that this is a transforming toy. If you're swapping parts out for completely different parts, that's not transforming. It didn't sit right with me then, and I much prefer this style, even if it means you can't do an open palm pose. The Pterodactyl has a lot going on, detail-wise, on its inside carriage. Remember, the Legacy left this completely plain. They really pelt it with patterns and make it a much better display piece for it. Other things that were previously exclusive to the SOC, things like Triceratops's tank treads, which admittedly Zap included too, but it's even got its chain horns, which were deployed once. The chain is naturally a thicker variant than what Soul of Jigokin gave us, but functionally works just as well. Sabertooth Tiger has the articulated legs at the knee and the front paws. Most variations of this Zord just give you the usual leg swing because the Zord requires it for transformation, but giving you those extra joints is how they go above and beyond. And the tail extends, which is another one of those unnecessary but premium features where it's like, you didn't even need to do that, but now you have. I can't unsee that every other version is cheap for having not done it. T-Rex continues the SOC and Hasbro Zap tradition of making the leg connection ports retractable and concealable in Zord mode. SOC and now this also go even further by making the plugs that connect the tail into the T-Rex Zord and later the Mastodon concealable as well. And the clip for Mastodon's head in tank mode is a little door that pulls out. More often than not, it's just a hole on the toy versions, so that is really smart work. The cannon in the T-Rex mouth is sculpted, which is obviously much better than just a sticker. The claws and forearms are posable and the waist swivels. They barely manage that on any of the toy versions. To reiterate, the material quality of the parts is really impressive. It feels sturdy, it doesn't feel like a compromise. It feels authentic. It's also gigantic. Is it too big? I'm mixed on this. I wouldn't want every Megazord in this scale. But there is an argument that I could make that this one can be done this way because it's as iconic as it is as the original. I feel like you really appreciate the size of the thing in person, but in video it mostly looks like the SOC. So why not bring in some other Zords we know are huge to compare it against? I feel like we all want to know, what's it bigger than? Serpentera? Pyramidus? The Super Train? Delta Command? The 2017 movie Megazord? The Zap Astro Megazord? Yeah, it's pretty big. This though is the remarkable spirit of Power Rangers. We know the design they've cribbed off is the best combinable realization of it from over 30 years of attempts. And it's not designed to be a toy that you can play with. It's a collectible that you craft together and then have as a display piece, as your ultimate version. And it's not that uncommon, is it? The Bandai Legacy and Imagine X non-combining Zords and Imagine X Megazord were also oversized large versions compared to what we'd had as the original combining deluxe toy. Playmates are making them bigger than they've ever been as toys before, so there's precedent for it, and this size might be reminiscent even for a young audience who grew up with some of those toys. But for those of us who were there at the beginning and have gradually tracked all the collector's versions across time, size is the most obvious difference factor this time. This is a unique experience in so many ways. The way you receive it is different, the way you use it is different at a part by part level, and then the way you keep it is different because it's practically like a set of screen use miniature props. And I hasten to call it a miniature when I've just called it the biggest version we've ever had, but I hope you get what I'm getting at. These Zords could be the ones from the show. You can't help but reevaluate each Zord because of their new imposing scale. You might know these Zords and think they look exactly the same as they always have done, but when you're actually handling them at this scale, it has a much deeper impact on you. Then the combination leads to something really impressive. It reminds me of when you'd have Megazords back in the day and being so in awe of them. The scale here is astounding. The way Megazord has been realised without compromise is so pleasing. And if you're worried about it taking up too much space, remember you can either break it down into 5 smaller parts or one big version with a smaller footprint. Where do we stand on the materials then? Well, there's a lot of die cast in every Zord, but it's not every part. ABS plastic is obviously the material that makes it all possible, but metal is definitely given great prominence, and you feel it frequently throughout the build process. Whoa. It's crazy how when you're in the reads of each Zord, everything seems so small and insignificant, and then you kind of pan out at the end of each Zord and it's like, wow, I made that. From boxes of parts, I put that together. It's got my effort and impact in there, and you feel this weird sense of accomplishment from having done it. Up to now, I've considered Zords as toys and the Soul of Chogokin as collectible statues. For these, I'd upgrade my definition as models. They are so substantial. You're so invested financially from paying for it, physically from the effort you put into assembly, and emotionally for the time you spend on this journey. It's too simplistic to call it a product. I've always wondered what crafting one of these partworks would even be like, and now I know, and it's a lot of time, it's a lot of work, but it's something you really get into a groove with, and you end up enjoying the process, staring at the Zords as they form in front of you, and excitably awaiting the day where you can finally combine them, because even though you know exactly what it's gonna look like when you eventually get there, it's the scale and weight that are the changed variables you can't yet account for. And if you never had the original designs this is based off, I think this will be a big, pleasing surprise for you. There have been so many versions of this Megazord at all ends of the price and quality spectrum. This is the absolutely insane one at the top end of all the metrics. Can we also take a minute to talk about the included items that come with the collection? You really get this substantial array of items that expand on the project. Some things are very simple but useful and make you appreciate that you're doing something long term for Power Rangers again. The mug and the portable power bank, both for fueling yourself and your devices, very apt for Power Rangers. You could even charge the Zord light up eyes with this. The t-shirt and backpacks are nice things you can take out into the real world if you like. They're really nicely done, not too garish. I really appreciate how classy these are. The power coins are just glorious, really the most. I can't believe we get this gift in the collection. It's so great to see these done in a new style. They're made of metal, they don't fit any of the existing morphers, so do consider them more of a display item, but I still like them. And the display base, the light up glowing plinth as I've come to term it, gives you a rightful podium on which to display your completed Megazord. It's such a cool idea, a satisfying side project build, actually the very first thing I put together, and it just says collector's item in the most perfect way. The magazine is such a cool component of this series. Having Mighty Morphin Power Rangers episode and character guides written with an adult in mind is not something we could really ever have expected to have happened. Whether you get it in the hardback book form, in the full kit, or the magazine form through the subscription, it's very cool to have this. It reminds me of when I would get and buy the old Power Rangers magazine back in the day. I rate it. If you grew up with Power Rangers, if you love the Zords and roleplay stuff of the Legacy line, this feels like the next evolution. So, to conclude, where does this fit into your collection if you've already got all the Megazords? I think there's definitely ways it can. Maybe you just want a prime version of the first Megazord to become the centerpiece over all the Megazord minions. Maybe you want to make the most of its alternate combination tank mode and leave this version displayed like that. Or maybe you just want to do what comes so easily for Dragonzord and Titanus and have them displayed as their separate Dinozords, maybe amongst different combined versions of the same season's toys. The fact that they went this route, made it this adaptive, gave us these options. This is one appealing release, and nobody's asking me to say that I'm saying this as a lifelong Power Ranger fan. This in some ways feels like the pinnacle of the mountain, a high quality, advanced version of something that was already considered by many to be the best version ever put out. I won't pretend it's perfect because nothing ever is, but in this category, it's far, far better than what we've previously known. Not putting this as a negative or a positive, but the weight is obviously something you will notice. Remember, I noticed in a very negative way in the Hasbro Zord Ascension project. Despite being, at the time, the tallest combining version of Megazord, it was also the lightest, so it just felt wrong. Now the title for tallest combining Megazord has passed hands to this version, and with it comes a lot of weight, both metaphorical and physical. As I've said, this is not a Megazord to play with. This is a Megazord to spend time building, and then be the ultimate displayable version you'll ever own. Ask yourself then, does that do it for you? Will it make you happy? Only you can answer that. Know that the build is the main interaction that you're going to be having with this thing. Once it's assembled, it's a giant, weighty display piece, or set of display pieces. And you can pose it exactly how you like, and you get to switch on the eyes or have them flash. The glowing plinth is obviously an inspired choice. As a centerpiece to a Power Rangers collection, it's an incredible one. You just have to be realistic about whether you can afford it. Not to mention where you're going to store it. The all-in-one kit box is about as big as a lampstand. It is in a scale all its own, and while that would annoy me if it was an ongoing series, I don't mind it so much as a one-off centerpiece item. Plus the details of the materials, as we mentioned, the accuracy of the paint, the contrast of the plastic and metal, I think you'll want to show this thing off. In 3 words, it's substantial, delicate, beautiful. Do I want there to eventually be a Dragonzord and Titanus? I don't think I do. And don't get me wrong, I'm a completionist, always have been, and it's usually a prerequisite. Once you get the first 5 Dinozords, you then want the other 2. But right now, it is nice to have this unique standalone version of Megazord, the one that started it all, and appeared from the very first episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers to the very last season Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, and the 30th anniversary special Once and Always. We know Power Rangers will be back, and it will look different, but for more than 30 years, this was the original, and it always will be. So though I'll always be curious what a builder Dragonzord and Titanus would look like, there's something almost definitive about Megazord being in a class on its own on a light up, glowing podium. So that's going to be it. Let me know your thoughts on the DeAgostini Magazine Megazord in the comments. Please help me and hopefully others like you out by liking the video, subscribe for more on Power Ranger Tube.